I'm Henry Pierman, Silverstone Classic with the 40th anniversary of Group C, and I'm joined with Derek Bell and Alex Brundle, and we're going to have a quick look through the cars and a chat about them. This is the car that was at the Nürburgring. You won here at Silverstone, chassis 07 956.
Yeah, I think 007 was right for it, but it was an amazing car. Obviously, they all have been, and we really had a very good run here to win the 1,000 Ks. I don't know by how much. We got a bit sort of used to doing wins, during that era. But Stefan's incredible drive at the Nürburgring, which actually depressed me beyond measure because I never won at the Nürburgring, and I was the only bloke in the whole field that was actually pissed off about it because I was about to win at the famous Nürburgring, having been on pole and done all sorts of things there over the years, even in Formula One. And there I was leading the race by a long, or we were leading by a long way, and bless his heart, he had his moments.
These days at the Nürburgring 24 hours, we've got ABS, traction control, and approximately a third of the power in a GT4 car or something similar, maybe approaching half. What's it like to drive that thing around there?
Well,
it's ridiculous.
It shouldn't have actually been there. I mean, if you'd got out of having driven this car with ground effects on all the tracks we drove, like Silverstone, Spa, anywhere, you go to the Nürburgring, and I loved the ring. It was my favourite racetrack in the world. It was so demanding. And literally all it did was leap off the road, and there is an in-car 956 film made about it called Porsche In-Car, but unfortunately the camera had one of those Hollywood cameras. It was sort of mounted beside me, and as we went along the straps holding it started to, and I had my elbow holding it, sort of almost driving one-handed to hold the camera steady, and it didn't show our hands on the wheel. And I mean, literally it was like this all the time, all the way around, off the ground, on the ground, it was terrible. And I thought, well, this can never come here again. Yeah. Beloff, of course, who spent most of his time in the air anyway, he was as happy as hell. So, and then the race, and he did such a wonderful job, but he was the upcoming star, and he unfortunately overdrove it just a little that day.
Did they bounce a lot then? Because in that same onboard 956, I've got it, the whole VHS. There's an amazing Le Mans on board. The amount of porpoising is just incredible.
Well, it was a lot, but we're on a highway. It's the main road from Paris to Spain. So, and it's 2 lanes wide, and so you're running into the gullies, and only that was that there's a trail. You've been to Le Mans. Literally, the 2 lanes have deep grooves where the truck's wheels go in, and we had to swap over from one side to the other to go buy something, and the car would give a twitch. And also all the way it was bumpy, but that was nothing like it was around the ring.
The ring
it was impossible, and I thought, you really can't do this. Porsche, we could do it, they'd have had to doing a lot to the suspension, but it's so low that you couldn't afford it going any lower because it would just beat the bottom out of the car.
I love it in the in-car 956 video, that as I've watched it 1,000 times. In fact, I wore the tape out to get another one, but with the car porpoising, you were saying, oh, well, it's a shame it doesn't really show. We're doing 190 miles an hour now, and there's the little castle over there, and there's Jacky Ickx on a qualifying lap, and by the way, you got the 3rd fastest ever time round the Nürburgring with the camera car holding the camera in place, just to put in perspective the speed they had.
I didn't really know that, Henry. He always makes me feel good.
So what were you up against then with this? What was your main competition then?
Well,
everything.
Well, there was probably 10 other Porsches.
Okay.
I wish so. That was
those were the days. I might have got a drive back then.
Yeah, you would have been not a problem. Then you go out and prove just how good you are. But the competitiveness was us beating Jacky Ickx and Jochen Mass. There was a hell of an entry because you could have a big entry. But,
so, for example, in that race, to fulfil a lifetime dream, Keke Rosberg was the 3rd driver in the Cannon Porsche. So he was in that race because he just wanted to drive the old Nürburgring that one time in a sports car.
Yeah, great.
And it was lovely that Formula One drivers wanted to do that. I think they'd still like to do it today, but nobody will allow them to do it.
Normally when they've lost their contract for a year, they come and lean on sports cars. I think Dad had a bit of a go at that at one stage. They rock up occasionally, but not as much. They're so locked up. They've got 23 races now in Formula One. There's not time.
There's no time, and they're too valuable. And they
said
drivers don't need it, but as you say, they get time off out of it. They lose a year contract, and then they go, actually, I'd like to do something that I really want to do, and sort of the experience.
Should we look at some Porsches and you can educate me a bit more? So Mass and Beloff.
Yeah, this is 83 car as well, so this is the replacement car that was built after this one was crashed basically, and this was a new car built. This is chassis 8, so its debut was at Le Mans. It led the first 4 hours. It was actually the first Le Mans I ever went to, and I went to Le Mans because I'd basically gone to a talk that Derek had done a few years ago, it was the winter of '82, and I had an old 750 motor club. I had an Austin 7 Special with a tree growing through the middle of it. We got out someone's front garden, and I went to this talk, and Derek was there. There was only about 30 people, and I was too shy to go and say hello to, which was stupid because I realised we could have got together years before. But you were just enthusiastic, and you've got to go to Le Mans, and all the flames out the side. So we drove down in a little 1100cc Golf through the night, found our way in, parked up, got moved off the Bugatti circuit at 6 a.m. where we weren't supposed to be. But just an amazing race, obviously that race for you that we were talking last night was the one that was one of the most exciting for you. 20 seconds, I think.
Yes, one race that I really remember because it was so hard. Jacky got taken out on the first lap at the end of Mulsanne, so he had to come back in after 50 cars had gone by. And then we got back, and of course it was real strict fuel regulations, which you probably realise we had. Yeah. And I mean, I can't even go into how we had to drive it. That was the difficult thing. People say you weren't going as quick then as they are now. We were flat out, but we weren't allowed to have any mixture.
Oh, okay.
So everything was turned down. You couldn't use 8,000, you could use 7.5. Yeah. And if you used 7.2, you'd use using less lap fuel, but you had to go around the corner like a bloody madman. And then you'll sit there shifting gear, going up to the next one. Instead of 230, only 210.
Keep the apex speed high, so you didn't have to build any speed.
No, exactly. So suddenly you got all excited, come down there, watching the revs and just back off here, or back out of it, and then suddenly, okay, let's go, and you just dive through the corner and off.
Formula E drivers could learn a lot from you guys. Maybe get the kids to PlayStation generation to give you a call, learn how to save some charge.
Yeah, I mean, we did. I mean, I try and be as quick as I can. In the middle of the steering wheel, we had a thing the size of like a book of stamps, literally 2 inches by 3 inches. Across the top it had 11, 12, 13. Down the side 1 to 13. On the hardwood or on the dashboard on the right it had another thing that's sort of the size of a shilling, and that told you the actual flow of fuel, how much you'd used. And you had to decide whether you were 11 laps, 12 laps or 13 laps on a tank. And every lap you went down, you had to read across to see what it should be at a certain point. In this case, Mulsanne, the kink in the Mulsanne restaurant, looked across, and we knew that at that point it should be at 6.7.
Yeah.
And if you came up here and it was actually reading, and it told you 6.7 on the 12 laps per hour, if it was wrong, you had to back off or you could go faster. We had that every lap of the race, all through the night.
Mode 4 acknowledge on an LMP2 steering wheel
there you are.
Does that, but it doesn't just tell you how much fuel you need to use, it tells you when to lift.
Oh God, does it really? It's unbelievable.
Just to get to.
We'd get in the pits afterwards and get out the car exhausted. I mean, mentally exhausted, because it wasn't physical. There were only two of us in those days. And I mean, we get out of the car and the team, and Norbert would say, you guys have got to be more considerate with the fuel consumption. You go, bloody hell, Norbert, how the hell can we do that? But by the end of that era, it would save something like 30% of the fuel. In that car there, we ran with 620 horsepower at Le Mans, 650. By the time we got to the one at the other end up there, number 18, I think it is, by the time we got to that, we had 800 in qualifying. And the engine was a 3.1 or 3.2.
And that was all from optimising fuel flow and using more
and efficiency by the team.
Wow, that's incredible.
And of course it had the desired effect. So it meant that if you had a 911, it went from doing 20 miles to the gallon to nearly 30.
Yeah.
As Porsche would say, every race has to be the development of something, and we have to be able to tell the board on a Monday morning that we have achieved something with what we did. But it wasn't much fun as a driver sometimes, but occasionally you won. So it was worth.
Got some champagne and that was fine.
This is quite interesting. So 82, there were 3 Rothmans Porsches at Le Mans, and they finished on the podium 1, 2, 3, having come here to do the 1,000-kilometre race, and then being told actually it's a 6-hour race. So you had to do 1,152 kilometres on 1,000 kilometres worth of fuel.
Race morning, Peter Falk, the next morning comes up with this he always was very slow. He came like a headmaster, and he said, "We are not going to win the race today." And I went, well, shit. I signed my contract was to win races, not to not win, but I knew what he meant. And we said, "So why is that, Peter?" And he said, we calculated on the Le Mans fuel consumption we were given is different to the 1,000-kilometre consumption. So we were lapping in 1 minute 24s in the race. 9 seconds off what we had been during qualifying. So the whole way around this bloody place, we were in 5th gear. For going through the chicane and just coming up and just coasting through and accelerating in 5th.
Is everybody on fuel save? Or
all the Porsches.
All the Porsches.
Yeah.
So, but there were cars.
Well, in that
that
race,
were
there was only that one car.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
only you that was having to go around sort of 9
and we were
seconds off your pole time.
and of course, they had quite a big audience because the new Group C's arrived. Let's see the new Porsches. And we're droning around going, these poor bastards don't realise that we're having a terrible time, and it's like a fix, wasn't it?
Exactly.
And Porsche used to get one or two of the people, they say, Derek, you mustn't criticise the rules. I said, yes, but we're racing drivers, not development drivers. You know, we can do both, but not totally one or the other.
So what was interesting to say for 83, it was a realisation if you didn't have a Porsche 956 you were nowhere. So they built 7 cars, privateer teams, the lead teams, and this is the very first car. So this is 101, the first customer car which went to Kramer. So at Le Mans in 83, there's a famous advert which says nobody's perfect because Porsche only got the top 9 places. I think they got the top 10 as another car was 9th, so they had 9 of the top 10 places in the 956s.
If I'd known, I'd have worn the T-shirt. I've got the T-shirt, and it's the guy who walks by. It's got right down there. It's got every car in the top 10, and there's one something else in there.
That's right. Yeah.
There's something else in there.
Or something
Nobody's perfect. It's really lovely.
So this was finished 3rd at Le Mans in 83. So this was a podium with the Andretti's driving. So that was an interesting car, and it showed that the privateers again could be competitive.
Yeah.
So again, that just made Le Mans super interesting, and it was sort of then the writing on the wall. So basically, there were 7 privateer cars that were built. John Fitzpatrick had one, and you obviously had Kramer. Joest had 2 cars. And then basically mid-season 2 more cars were ordered, and this is one of the 2 new cars that was ordered. And
it's like H. Pearman drove that one over there.
It does. He's been known to drive this car.
So this is chassis 110. So this was a new car that John Fitzpatrick bought for Le Mans in 83 as well. And frustratingly, it's the only one that didn't finish. It was the nobody's perfect car that let them down. But this then went to Brands Hatch in September, and it beat the factory cars fair and square. In fact, it put a lap on Stefan Beloff, I think, in the first hour. It was super wet, and John had worked out that there's cooling underneath on the ducts, and basically because he thought Brands Hatch September, it's going to be chilly, it could be wet, so they sealed them off, and they did a lot of secret testing in the US, because he actually raced this car in America first, and it's the only car to win in Can-Am, so it's the only 956 with an American history as well.
Clever, actually. I mean, we couldn't believe it because we were usually quick. And we were being pissed over by this private team, which was very capable, Derek Warwick and people like that, were very capable. And you go, well, it must be the drivers. It had to be. But in fact, it was the drivers, but plus they'd got this little move on us, so the fan didn't cool down the engine, and therefore take air away from underneath the car.
And you didn't lose any ground effect?
No.
You could buy one. Anyone could buy one.
Absolutely.
You could turn up to Porsche, you didn't have to prove anything, you didn't have to prove that you could run it, or you could literally get in touch.
Basically, yes.
Well, I spoke to Richard Lloyd when he bought the Cannon car, and he was so excited. We're going to buy a World Championship car. This is going to be a chance to win Le Mans. And they're all just painted white. And he turned up, and there was no one there to see him. I thought, this is such an exciting day. And eventually he said, oh yeah, no, you've got that car. It's down in the basement somewhere. And it was all covered in dust. And they said, oh, there's the ignition key. Goodbye. And just left. That was it.
Your problem now.
Yeah, off you went.
Yeah,
and they
lovely.
very cleverly sold everyone the car with the Le Mans bodywork. So in Monza in 83 in the first race, no one had got the high downforce that the factory cars had, the sprint bodywork.
Yeah, much different.
So then that was another extra. So so Porsche had fantastic stuff, but you had to pay for it. Things were there, but the invoice book was busy.
Was it insanely expensive to buy one and run it?
I think they were 620,000 Deutschmarks at the time.
At the time?
Yeah. So say 150 grand or something like that.
It was brilliant. It was amazing. That's what Porsche did. And they've done this since time was, and I'm not harping on about Porsche, but they have supported sports car racing. As somebody said to me in the last few days, they said, what would racing be like today without Porsche being in there? There'd be no club sports, there'd be no Porsche club racing where the guys could... I mean, if you came to me when you were 16 and said, Derek, I want to go racing, what do you suggest? I'd love to drive sports cars, but I can't afford single-seaters at this stage. I'd say, buy a Porsche club car. You can take it out of the garage on a Friday night, pump the tyres up, put fuel in, and go and race it over the weekend. Bring it back, park it, and next time you're ready, take it again. There weren't any other cars you could do that with.
I still believe they're still the biggest manufacturer of race cars of all time, are they not? Porsche?
They must be.
Porsche make more race cars than anyone.
Oh, yeah. But they build them, and they're damn good. Do you know what I mean? They're not building them just for the sake of, we got to sell this, whatever it is.
Yeah. No, it's
going to work.
It's a great heritage in motorsport.
Yeah,
That's
it
for
is.
sure.
You're lucky to get to drive it. Have a go, kid. You never know. You're still young enough for something to happen proper. Well, there's a new formula coming out, isn't it? You never know. You know, get yourself a drive at Le Mans, one of those.
Yeah.
And it'll be just a ticket. We knew whenever we went into a race, we had a chance to finish. We also knew we had a chance to win. And you knew the car wouldn't really let you down.
Great days.
I mean, I had one engine blow up and all those. I'd love to know how many races I actually did here and in America. We only had one blow up, and one was when Siffert was driving. Actually, that was the 917. I don't remember one blowing up in one of these when I was driving.
No, I can't think of one. I know the drive shafts broke with the PDK.
Oh, that was every week.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
That's another story, development.
Yeah, it must have been a great life, pounding around, same car every week.
Yeah,
you knew your stuff.
It was always a bit different, but it was always the same, if you know what I mean. You'd get out and you say, that's better through that. Well, we put slightly narrow wheels, but bigger arches now, so you've got more ground effect, because we got less, the wheels became narrower, so you had more tunnels, more suction.
But they could actually afford to race them. And race them properly all the time, all year, and test them all the time, all year. Not, right guys, we're going to go testing. It's going to be 3 days and it's going to cost X million quid. So we need to get this out of it.
Got to get this work.
We need you in and out quick, you know, all of that stuff.
There was absolutely no ever pressure when we went testing. Somebody said, what was it like when you all drove the 956 at Paul Ricard the first time it ever showed up? There was Ickx and me and Jochen, I think, just the three of us. And I go, well, we just got out and we drove it. And we got out and said, yeah, very nice, thank you. And then Jacky would get in and go out and come, and then Norbert was saying, okay, we've done 20 laps each. I want to try this bit of bodywork, or I want to try this or that. And we'd try things and get in, and two of us would drive it, and the third one would get in when it was, pretty much, we knew which way we were headed all the time. Very rarely did we take a development track and say, hold on, we're going the wrong way here. Everything was, because I know Singer was just so brilliant at knowing where he wanted to go.
The critical point there is you all got a chance to have a go. Right now we're so limited on testing time, you've got to trust the other guys.
Yes, I know.
He'll try that, he'll try this, he'll try that. You all come together in a room and it's Mike thinks X, so we'll go. I mean, I'm very jealous.
And then Mike might be the guy that's the better driver. He also might not, and he might be quirky and have his own opinions. That's why two drivers are so perfect. And they put Ickx and I, because we had this very equal balance of how we liked a car. I mean, he said the cars are fine. And I did with Stuckey. I say, if you say it's better, Stuckey will do it.
Believe you,
Because I respected enough that he had done it properly, or it was good. Oh, that's much better. Okay, let's go, and we'd all go quicker. Never said, I don't think that's right. I mean, I'd say to Norbert, I think we can go further with the development, and you say, okay, try it. I don't think it's going to work. But he'd let us do it. Basically, we were testing we're not testing. We were doing Le Mans with the long tail, but with the chicanes in. And I remember saying to Norbert, I'm still convinced. I'm not convinced that the long tail is quicker over a lap round Le Mans than the short tail. With great. I didn't know what percentage was more ground effect. How it worked. And so Norbert, because he was Norbert, said to me, take the car out then. So I took the car out with a short tail like that, number one sitting there. Off I went round, did my first lap, and I was convinced. So you're convinced you're going to try so hard. And so I did the first lap, went down the straight, and I lifted off a bit, and I thought, there was no shudderings and all sorts of things happening. Next lap, come out onto Tête Rouge, whack, then really going. I went through the Dunlop, the Tête Rouge corners, coming down there, out onto the straightaway, flat out, and then suddenly there was a bang. And the car like this, and it sucked the whole of the under tray off the car. So I cruised back with it, and I drove in, and Norbert said, I guess it didn't work, did it? But that was it. But you could try it. I've always felt, I never drove for other teams that much, so I could never compare and say, well, Joe Bloggs wouldn't let me do what I wanted. But the fact was, we both wanted the same. The drivers both had the same. There was none of us trying to be. I mean, Ickx was to me the great star, and I respected him. I was with him a little bit at Ferrari, and I just had so much knowledge of Jacky's experience and watched him the way he handled himself, and I thought, gee, I'd like to be as good. I never was as good as him, but I'd like to be like him. And so I modelled myself, but not really thinking about it. I just said, well, he's doing it right, so I'll do that, whatever it is. And we had just this incredible parity the whole way through, Never any feeling, oh, he's quicker than me. Because we all know that you can go out 2 hours later on the same tyres, and you'll be half a second quicker or slower, because that's the way racing is. As long as the car's the same for both of you.
Yeah. So which car was that then? That's this one as we move down here then was.
Well, what we've got here, just to do the chronology as well, to make a bit of sense for you guys. So the cars in 83, the customer cars, they were basically a copy of the 82 factory cars. So they were running mechanical fuel injection, and they had a different aero package. So the frustration with the privateers is the factory development. It was constant, wasn't it, Derek? Literally at Weissach, they were running all the time with Kausmann, wasn't it? And people like that running. So there's a Singer profile underneath, which helps with the downforce on the front. And they went to the electronic fuel injection, which is where electronic fuel injection really got developed. So the Works cars in 83, the Beloff cars and the first car, are running with the fuel efficiency. So what happened in 84, the privateers thought, well, we've got no chance against a factory car because it's so much faster. So they built 4 editions of this car, which is called some people, it's a 956-84 is the correct term. It was called, Quentin Spurring called it a 956B, which is basically what it was, and that's an exact copy. It's a Works Rothmans car, but for the privateer teams. 4 cars were built. This car, John Fitzpatrick ran for the season with Skull Bandit and ran it through 3 seasons. And this was running at the front at Le Mans in 84. This was a car basically that Derek secured his world championship in 86 when there was a tiebreaker between Derek and Hans Stuck, where you shared the car together, and I know you were always frustrated.
I didn't share it with,
in the Super Cup you didn't drive, and then basically because Derek and Hans did all the world championship races together, they wanted a single champion, and Hans had been in Super Cup, and you had a one-off drive in this car in 86, and it turned out that you finished and Hans had a problem that race, so you got awarded the world championship.
And I beat you by 2 places. Didn't I?
You did.
Really embarrassing. And Fitzy said, "You won't get any. I'll give it. You can borrow the car. Take." I mean, they just jumped in it and drove it. And he said he's got these not good tyres, for example. And he said he's just a runner, but he might pick some points up. We didn't pick any points up, but we picked up the world championship instead. I feel so bad about it.
And that's when your drive shaft broke in the PDK car. It was the last round of the year, and you got the world championship for drivers, world championship for manufacturers, and the development was more important than the championship, wasn't it?
They wanted me to run ABS as well, and I said, bloody hell, I've never tested it. Never mind, Herr Bell, we got it to. So they phoned up the ISAC and spoke to Professor Bott and said, Derek's pitching it again. That he's got to do a development of PDK and a development of the ABS. And he said, came back and they said, you can take one off but not both. So I went, I'll go for ABS, and of course race day turns up the next day hissing with rain. And of course ABS would have been perfect. Anyway, that was another story.
962 came in 85, so that's the factory ran the 962s initially first, so that's the first car that ran a 3-car team at Le Mans, and that was the year, in fact, the factory were 3rd place, weren't they? So Joest came first, Richard Lloyd came second, with his own redesigned chassis, so it showed how the privateers were taking on the factory, which made it really competitive.
And they let them.
Exactly.
They let them. The reason being is I said to Professor Bott, I think there's something wrong with this picture. And he said, Derek, it's very important that our private owners win some races. Well, it's nice when you've already won 4 Le Mans. You can let them win one, can't you?
You can let them win one or 1 or 2 at the end of the year.
It's awful to say that. Joest deserved it. He was the best of the private teams, wasn't he?
Exactly.
He was right, and he ended up running these cars for the factory too. You know, at the end of their era, you phoned me up and say, Porsche want me to run a car for them, and I'd drive it. And so on.
Pole, that was Derek's regular sprint car. That had 4 consecutive podiums and 4 consecutive pole positions, including Le Mans. And then straight after Le Mans, Porsche pulled out completely and didn't race anymore.
They look sorted.
Yeah,
they look mean. It looks meaner.
Right,
It's that they're just, I don't know, somehow less lumpy and like focused, a little more focused. Yeah.
So these 2 were then converted. So Porsche pulled out mid-season, and then they said, all we'll do is we'll come back for Le Mans in 88 for a last hurrah with the factory team with this car. And this is probably one of the most famous cars because this took the fight to Jaguar. Jaguar turned up with 5 cars with the intention to win Le Mans. Walkinshaw had always said 3 years and we'll win Le Mans. And so Porsche built this car 7 seconds quicker on the pole than the year before. And it's got electronic wastegates and things. This is the one with 850 horsepower, so this was Derek's car, which famously was comfortably out in the lead until Mr. Ludwig missed the pit entrance and did an extra lap and ran out of fuel at Arnage. and got it round onto the by the pits. It was on the starter motor to bring it into the garages, and you were 2 laps behind, weren't you, Derek?
We lost 2 laps, and we finished how close did we finish?
Oh, you're 40 seconds.
40 seconds behind at the end.
Having spent 7 more minutes in the pits.
To say, Stuck and I said, I think we'll carry on now.
Impressive set of batteries on it.
You've learned a lot about electrics.
So then obviously Derek, for 89, this was the Richard Lloyd cars, so these were known as the British Porsches. So in 87 the Jaguars won 8 out of 10 races, were running second at Le Mans, had an issue, so they literally dominated everything. The only car to beat them was the Richard Lloyd, the first one of these, and this is like the second car, and this is Derek's car for the 89 season, but you can see how the aeros changed completely. This is a Nigel Stroud chassis that was unique to the Lloyd cars, so 3 cars built, full honeycomb chassis, carbon bulkheads, so you're getting a lot stiffer car because there's so much more downforce. You get electronic wastegates, and in fact Richard Lloyd was so respected by the factory they gave him the Works engines. So in fact the engine that was running in this car was the engine we've now put back into that car, which it turned out was the pole position, the winning car's pole position qualifying engine, because they're numbered differently, the factory engines. So that was basically 89, which Derek did the full season at Le Mans, and then that was built in 89 and then ran in 90. So that's the one I've been lucky enough to drive over the years, and they just a lot more modern, aren't they?
Yeah,
they just bring everything up to date.
Yeah, well, you can see it by the body.
What's the difference in feeling then? Well, did they just hunker down?
That's all.
Downforce?
It was much sharper, more racy.
Okay.
That's all it did. It went from being a limo right in the very beginning, right through to something that was a darty, like
single-seater,
nearer to Formula One. Yeah, exactly. Which is the way it was going to go.
Yeah. So when I started historic racing in 04 in the Turbo Jag with Win Percy, and I was shared with him, which was like, wow, I can't believe this. I only driven an old 3.2 Carrera in Porsche Club racing up till then, but it was really tricky and stiff to drive. And you drove the Jaguar yesterday, and they're like jumping out of the Formula One car. Exactly.
That's an LMP
Whereas
car.
These, you're sitting in an armchair. So I had the Nissan R90. Remember the famous Mark Blundell crazy pole lap? I raced one of those in 07 for the season.
Yeah. Did you manage to keep it going?
I actually didn't crash it. I didn't spin it, but I was told, you've got to warm the tyres up more, because it started wheel spinning on its own down the straights, because it had all its Japanese telemetry and some injectors were playing about. And Chris Crawford said, well, just warm the tyres up on the opening lap. So the old Abbey chicane here at the time, I just tried to spin the wheels, and then I just saw marshals running everywhere, and I just saw sort of barriers, and managed to get it all straightened up. I thought, well, that didn't work. And I came back on the first race lap, and there's just all these squiggles and lines everywhere. I thought, no, that's no good. Jumped back in, good old Pinky, the next year, 4 seconds quicker out the box, just because it gives you confidence.
That's a very interesting livery on that car, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got no idea what it really says.
No. Well, you have to find out at some point to make sure you're not driving around with something rude on the front.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that probably is the case. Yeah, that was the last 962 to get a podium, and that was 1990. So just you can see the whole evolution. In fact, we just brought out the book on the factory Works cars, which is like a 3-volume set, which is just amazing, done by Porter Press, and that just goes through every single car, every single race. And the guy that wrote the book's been studying it since 1988, so he's even got every gearbox ratios, engine number, how many kilometres. It's just, book of a decade if you look at it. I mean, it's too heavy to pick up, isn't it? To be honest,
it's just over there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Good luck with the rest of your races today.
Educate me on that.
You just need to drive them all.
To take in. I've got to have a go in one at some point. That Jag was absolutely brilliant yesterday.
Yeah, well, have another go a bit later, and the books tell you the story. We've done the one on the Fitzpatrick story as well, because that's how the privateers took on the team and beat the factory team. So it was just an amazing era, wasn't it? I mean, it's just the
just so lucky to be part of it.
Seeing with sports cars.
Anyway,
See you later, gang.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.